Okay, so today what I'm going to do for you is just talk about the system basically, which is the first thing really that you should start with when you learn Roadcraft or advanced driving for the IAM or ROSPA test. Now what is the system? Well, it's basically a method of car control, 5 kind of point system that it's not to make driving any more difficult for you, it's to make it easier. And so if you imagine what most people do when they're driving along, is that what they're doing is actually doing everything together at the same time. And they're coming up to a roundabout maybe, and they're braking and they're steering around the roundabout and they're changing gear maybe all at the same time. If you think about what that's doing to the car, it's asking the car to do a lot with its tyres. You know, there's a certain amount of grip available, and if you ask it too much to do at the same time, it's going to skid potentially. It's also asking your hands to do a lot. If you think about, your hand on trying to, steer, brake, and your hand and feet are doing a lot at the same time. It's also asking your mind to do a lot at the same time. So if we separate those things into distinct phases and try to avoid any overlap between them, what we'll end up with is basically a method of driving the car such that we're always in the correct gear. We'll start from the top. Then we're always in the correct position. We always have the correct speed, and we're always in the correct gear to deal with any hazard. And it's a very good system. It works really well. And it's very logical as well. It's nothing that you need to think it's not the right way to drive. It is the right way to drive, and when you think about it, there's no other way to drive. It's just a matter of disciplining yourself to get it into practice. So what are the phases of the system then? Well, the first phase is information, and that overlaps everything else. So basically, as I'm coming to a hazard, I'll take in information, I'll use that information, and I'll give out information if necessary. For example, with the use of signalling, headlamp flashes, horn signals, indicators, that kind of thing. Or maybe even just to position the car might be enough to give out enough information that I'm happy that I don't need to do anything else. So take, use, and give information. Now that phase overlaps the rest of the phases of the system. Then the 3 key phases of the system that people tend to overlap are position, speed, and gears. Now position just means getting the position of the car set for the hazard correctly, and you do that first, you do that early. The thing is, you learn as you practice the system is that the earlier you start the system, the better you'll be at it basically. So especially when you're starting it, start early and get yourself sorted out nice and early for it. So we're going to adjust our position first for the hazard, and then we're going to just, once we've got our position sorted out, we'll adjust the speed, and once we've got our speed sorted out, we'll adjust the gears and we'll take the correct gear. Generally what we're aiming to do is only take the gear once for the hazard. It's not always applicable, but generally. And we're aiming not to do any of this kind of coming down through the gears like you see maybe older drivers doing, because that's completely pointless. Modern cars can stop on their brakes alone. They don't need engine braking to stop them. And then finally, once we've negotiated the hazard, and maybe just around, if it depends what kind of hazard it is, we'll apply some acceleration. That just means applying a little bit of drive to keep the car under control so it's still in balance, and that's particularly applicable to bends, but also to just junctions and turns, and also to roundabouts. So we're going to do some of those today. We're going to do some bends, we're going to do some roundabouts, and we're going to do some junctions, and not in no particular order. So I'll go through another session where we'll talk about the cockpit drill. I've already done my cockpit drill today, but I will go through a session talking about that properly. I won't waste time with that today. I'm going to just talk about the system. So I'm going to start the car then, and what we're going to consider is information first. So just to move off then initially, just having a good look all around the mirrors, and then I'm going to move off, shoulder check offside then, and just take it and move off. At the top here I'm going to turn right first of all, so mirror information. Position's really dictated by parked vehicles, so we can't do too much about that. There's no one to signal to at the moment. That's another key thing about IAM or ROSPA driving. Well, IAM driving, that's what I know most about, so that we don't signal generally unless there's someone to signal to. That's a really good way, because it makes you think about your signalling the whole time. So there's no one around at all to signal to at the moment. I'm not capable of actually physically negotiating this roundabout without crossing it slightly, so that's acceptable under the highway code. If I can't physically do it, that's fine. Okay, so we're coming up here now. And what's a hazard, first of all? When the system talks about hazards, what are we talking about? Well, we're basically talking about anything that may cause us to change speed or direction. And I would suggest to you that there's actually quite a lot of things that might cause you to change speed or direction, but basically the system only applies to hazards that we're planning to do something about. And you get better at planning as you get better at driving, basically, as you get better at advanced driving. But basically, if someone was to run out in front of me at the moment, and and there was an emergency situation, I wouldn't be applying the system. I would just be sorting that situation out as quickly and safely as possible. In other words, I might just do, if I had time, I would do a mirror check, so a little bit of information, but then we just stamp on the brakes. This car's ABS, so I'll be standing on the brakes basically and steering away from the hazard if necessary. There'll be no system applied there. because by the time you get to thinking about information, position, you're going to knock the child over or hit the cyclist or whatever it is. Just sort it out. So don't allow yourself to be distracted by the system for things like that. It's only for hazards. Now, what we're talking about hazards then. So hazards, as I said, is anything that changes speed or direction. Now, if we're planning a hazard, if we can see it in plenty of time, we can apply the system. Then, so what sort of hazards are we looking at? Well, there's what just coming up here. There's a hazard. There's a bend. So information is a bend. There's also a junction on the bend. I've just passed a sign to tell me about that. So all I have to really do is, I mean, it's still in the 30 here, so I'm just keeping my position just over to the left slightly, and that's all I need to do. And the gear is already sorted out. So let's look at another hazard. There's the next bend, and it's going slightly around to the right. I've got the ramp post telling me about that. So just take a little bit of position to the middle, and that's it really. That's all I need to do. And then we've got another bend again going around to the right ahead. So information, position nice and early now, over to the left, getting ourselves as much view around to the right as we can. Watching a sign for a junction as well, and keeping it round to the left now. We've also got national speed limit. That's another hazard. This is going to cause us to change our speed. So information, one behind, following not too closely. So I'll get some gas on now and position over to the offside now for this bend round to the left. So this is fairly, this kind of driving now is more, possibly more, not really what you should start practicing the system with. Just one obviously on an overtake there. I'm just allowing him plenty of time to get to complete that. But so basically, let's look at, we're coming into town now, in towards Abingdon, and basically what I'm looking at is how to do the system for negotiating hazards like junctions and roundabouts. I think that's a good place to start with the system. Once you get that down, you can talk about bends later. So here's a hazard. There's two cyclists on the near side. So information, there's one behind, not following too closely. There's also school patrol. That won't be active until Sunday. So mirror. There's also a parked car on the offside as well. So I'm going to give a signal to the one behind, shoulder check and position now, and just keeping on the drive. That's speed. And I don't need to change the gear mirror. So you see, the system basically isn't. It's really good philosophy. It's not something that you need to necessarily do everything in the system all the time, but you do need to consider the phases of the system in turn. And if you do them without any overlap and do them in plenty of time and start them plenty of time back from the hazard, then you'll be fine. So a hazard is also, for example, the little junctions and entrances on the side here. So all I'm doing about that is just information and maybe a little bit of position. So the other thing that the system kind of allows you to do, basically, is it allows you to choose your weapons of choice, if you like. If you think about it, to maintain progress of the car, which is one of the key things we want to do when we're driving the car, if we've got a hazard and we adjust our position early enough, we might be able to just get away with that alone. And just in position means that we can keep our speed on and therefore maintain progress. If not, we can take some speed off, and that will potentially lead to a reduction in gear. Or, change of gear anyway. So, do you see what I mean? It's kind of a... If you drive like that, basically you'll be able to maintain better progress. So I would suggest that the system is key to maintaining progress, really. Because the examiner on the IAM test, anyway, will like to see you maintaining a good progressive drive. He won't like to see you stopping unnecessarily or slowing down unnecessarily. And the system is the way to do that. So information, there's one giveaway sign coming up. I know there's going to be a junction here. I'm going to turn to the right mirror. I'm going to signal to the right now as well on approach, and shoulder check and position across. Getting the speed off now, first an acceleration sense and then bringing in the brake slightly. So planning to stop, but looking for the opportunity to keep the vehicle moving, just keeping away from the one who's turning in, keeping it crawling up here, even if I can keep it inching up. It's a very restricted view to the right, so I'm going to have a look left and then, hang on, and then I'm going to look right just as I start to move. Having a look left again, after this red car, and we got one now, we got space to the right. So as I move off, I'm going to look to the right. That's last look, kind of least visibility, if you like. So if you come into a junction like that, and one of the views is better than the other, then as you move off, have a look to the as you're moving the car off, have a look at the one that's offering you least visibility. That way, if something does appear at the last minute, you're primed to deal with it, really. So we're coming into Abingdon now, and I'm going to show you the system as applied to roundabouts. We're still in a 30 here, so I'm just keeping it 31 towards mirror. Now, I must admit, I'm finding it difficult to avoid going into full commentary, which I don't want to do for you at the moment. So information, signal to one behind, shoulder checking position to the offside, bringing in speed, planning to stop, but looking for the opportunity to go. So approaching at a speed where I could stop if something was to appear, but also looking for the opportunity to keep the vehicle rolling. In other words, not getting the speed off too late. Get the speed off nice and early, and then just keep the vehicle rolling forward. And that way you can blend in to traffic that's already on a roundabout potentially.